In tonight's stories, 6 nightmares take shape. A mission in the mountains turns into contact with something not human. A murdered boss returns, bloodied and grinning, for one last drink. A lumberjack's mistake haunts him with a crawling corpse. Sleep paralysis becomes a doorway for shadows that write on the ceiling. A UFO lands in the field across from home. And a voice calls your name in the dark sometimes, in your own voice. 6 tales of terror, deception, and things that should not exist. Welcome to Nightmare Proof, where true horror comes alive. Here, you'll hear real stories of the strange, the disturbing, and the unexplainable. Turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to face the darkness. 1. The night we weren't alone. I've sat on this for years. I haven't told too many people outside my former teammates, a couple of close family members. I'm a retired Green Beret, ex-Ranger, and spent the last decade of my career in Tier 1 counter-terror operations. I've seen things most people can't imagine. Nothing rattled me like what went down in the fall of 2007 inches, the mountains of Redacted. We were on a straight-up HVT snatch, insert by helo, move on. NVGs, take the target before dawn. Standard mission set. The only weird part was the last-minute addition to the briefing, a liaison from an unnamed agency with the call sign, Spectre. He hardly talked. He handed our team leader a sealed envelope stamped, Eyes Only. I caught a quick look, a grainy sat photo, odd heat signatures, and a handwritten note that read, If you see anything that doesn't make sense, do not engage. Observe. Report. Exfil immediately. We laughed it off in the brief, but the mood in the room wasn't joking. Infill was textbook. We hit the LZ, split into 2 fire teams, and moved to establish a perimeter. The village was dead, not quiet, dead. No barking dogs, no smoke from cooking fires, not even the usual tang of wood and animals. My comms. Guy whispered, Oscar Mike, this place is giving me the creeps. I was point when we stacked on the target. As I breached, there was a static hush in the air, like the skin prick before a lightning strike. The room was empty. No HVT, no civilians, just an old radio spitting static and walls plastered with symbols I didn't recognize. Not Arabic, not Pashto. Our medic, an 18D, said under his breath, This isn't right. Then our comms went dead. NVGs flickered, then died. We switched to red lights. The darkness felt thicker, like it had weight. I heard movement outside, deliberate, heavy, but not the cadence of boots. Something was circling us. Spectre didn't panic. He pulled a small meter out of his pocket, and it went off a rapid clicking that I'd never heard before. He mouthed, Stay inside. Do not engage. The footsteps stopped. Then a low, guttural sound rolled through the night, a growl that wasn't any animal I know. Static cracked in the old radio, and a voice came through. English, perfect, metallic, and wrong. You are not authorized. Leave now. It wasn't human. It sounded like audio played wrong, stretched and snapped back at the same time. Spectre called us out. We broke contact fast and low. As we moved, I glanced back and saw shapes in the dark. Tall, thin, almost human in silhouette. But they moved in ways that didn't obey the rules. I tried to convince myself it was insurgents in ghillie suits. It didn't fit. At the LZ, the helo was already spinning. As we lifted, lights in the village popped on, one by one, arranged in a perfect circle. My headset buzzed again. Do not return. Back at base, we were debriefed separately. Spectre was gone. The official record called it a dry hole and logged unusual electronic interference. The AAR was classified above our pay grade. Some of the guys never got over it. Nightmares lasted months. One left the service within a year. He said he couldn't shake the feeling we'd seen something none of us were supposed to. I've tried to rationalize it, PSYOP, a test, hostile tech, a misdirected program. I don't have answers. What I do know is this. The scariest things aren't always targets you can engage. Sometimes the worst part is knowing you'll likely never get the truth. What we saw What I saw with my eyes scared the shit out of me, and still does to this day. I still get some strange shit happening that I cannot really discuss or comprehend. Just hoping others out here have seen some of these things. Never been a conspiracy theorist. 2. I killed someone, but they're still alive. Do you know what I hate the most? Annoying people. The answer is annoying people. You know those people back then in school who made stupid, not even funny jokes in serious situations? Those kids who would just lie nonstop for no reason whatsoever? Those bloody idiots who couldn't keep their hands to themselves and would always be touching you? Those fucking idiots who acted like know-it-alls but in fact didn't know a damn thing? That kind of person was what I hated the most. I know this might sound pretty harsh and evil, but I genuinely wish they would die. You would think that most of these people would be kids, immature little kids, but no. You would be pretty damn unlucky to come across this type of person when they are fully grown and matured adults. Here's the kicker. I'm always pretty damn unlucky. In almost every situation, I am unlucky. Even when I got my job as an office assistant that actually paid pretty good, I was unlucky because in that exact job, I meet that fucking idiot Mark. Mark was that annoying type of person I demised greatly. Oh, and speaking of unlucky, he was my fucking manager. Yes, that's right, my manager. That meant he could boss me around anytime he wanted. He could even threaten me by firing me if my work got too sloppy. Listen, I wouldn't give a rat's ass if someone else did that. But Mark, oh no, that was too much for me. The only thing keeping me sane, the only thing that kept me from quitting right then and there, was the pay. Yes, I was quite poor, and I needed money greatly. And this job was relatively easy, and paid more than I deserved for the work I did. However, he was quickly getting unbearable. You know what that motherfucker made me do once. He made me make a multiple PowerPoint slideshow, customized differently for all my colleagues, which was 37 colleagues, and being the annoying idiot he was, he made me add a rickroll at the end of each slideshow. That took 3 hours, and he didn't even pay me for that. Why should I pay you? You didn't do proper work, Mark said, chuckling. That little motherfucker. I really wanted to kill that fucking idiot. And, in the end, I guess I did. Well, not exactly. One possible reason why he was such an idiot could be his drinking habits. He would go into this one bar, the same one each time almost every night, and drink away. Pale ale, whiskey, gin and tonic, you name it. He would slurp it all down, slowly killing his brain cells. Now this took up a lot of courage and commitment, but I finally decided I was sick of this motherfucker. I was going to kill him, and I worked out plans to do it. A big project of mine, I guess. I ordered a bottle of malt whiskey. Yes, I ordered an expensive one, but that was all right. I was getting good pay, and I needed the good stuff for such a big project. You can probably see where this is going. I invited him over one night to share the whiskey, and he accepted with glee, obviously. I was waiting on my sofa, nervously. In the little time I was waiting for him, I reconsidered. If I didn't cover my tracks properly, the authorities would find out, and I would spend quite some time in jail. Just doing nothing, trapped in a cell behind bars. I definitely didn't want to spend part of my life like that. I was seriously freaking out. Even cons. Knock, knock, knock. Mark was here. I got up hurriedly and went over to the door. I guess I would have to be careful. I would make sure I wasn't sloppy. I opened the door and saw Mark standing there, smiling with a childish glee. "How are you doing, Mr. Burke?" he asked me. That fucking idiot. He called me Mr. Burke again, and he knew I didn't like it, but I bear it this time, knowing he wouldn't be saying that again. Just fine. Step inside. I got the whiskey waiting for you, and please take your shoes. But before I could finish, he stepped inside, shoes still on. Fuck Mark. I sighed as he passed, walking straight to where the whiskey was waiting for him, as if pulled in by the booze. By the time I caught up, he was drinking the whiskey straight from the bottle. He hadn't even waited for me. "This is some good shit," Mark said. taking gulps of the liquid. "You should invite me over to your house more often," he added in, as if I was going to do that, and as if he was going to live to see tomorrow. I nodded and plastered a fake grin on my face. "Sure thing," I say. Okay, this was it. I laid a tarp right down on the floor where me and him were standing, and being the idiot he was, he hadn't even noticed. As he slurped down the whiskey, almost finishing it, I turned my back to him and walked over to a drawer. I slowly and quietly opened the drawer and pulled out a knife I had sharpened earlier that day. "Hey Mark, got something else for you," I say, turning around to face him, keeping the knife discreet. Mark smiles. "Oh yeah?" he says, his voice already slurred. In a flash, I bring the knife around and slash his stomach deep. His eyes widen in shock, and he clutches at his stomach as his intestines and entrails fall out, splashing blood all over the tarp. As his attention was transfixed on his guts' fallout out, I raised the knife and stabbed him right in the throat. He tried to scream, but all he achieved was a sick, gurgling as blood spurted out. He collapsed to the floor, a pool of blood quickly flooding out onto the tarp. The rest of the night was a blur. I went insane with joy, mutilating his body with my knife and my fists. Blood was everywhere, and the tarp barely helped. But I cleaned it all up in the end, dismembering his body with a rusty saw and triple bagging each part. I cleaned all the blood, and by 2 a.m. in the morning, everything was clean again. I was so fucking happy. That idiot was finally gone. What a fucking relief. Just to rub salt into the wound. Even though Mark was dead, I visited the bar he always went to the next night. What a fucking mistake that was. I sat down on a wooden stool and ordered a drink, a gin and tonic. I sat there taking sips of the refreshing liquid. When it showed up, it walked through the door of the bar, completely concealing its features by the cloak it was wearing. Something looked off, and on closer inspection, the cloak seemed to be made of a tarp, and sections of it seemed to be stained with a dark brown liquid. Almost as if its whole purpose was to find me, it stepped straight towards me, heading right for me. A little chill ran down my spine as it reached me and took a seat opposite me. Now, everyone in the bar was watching, curious about what was going to happen. In a gravelly voice, it spoke. "Do you know who I am?" I shook my head, but I think deep down I knew. But I just didn't want to. It raised its arms, the fingers wrapped in bandages, and pulled the tarp serving as a hood off its head. It was Mark. Even in the state he was in, I knew it was Mark. Multiple stabs and slashes ran across his bloody face. One eyeball was hanging loosely, and the other was completely gone. Mark slowly stretched his mouth into a grin, showing crooked and missing teeth. I screamed, along with many others in the bar who were unbelieving and terrified. I got up off my stool quickly and rushed to the door, with many others who were piling out. I took one last look and saw Mark tugging something out of the tarp. It was a bottle of malt whiskey, the one I had bought. Mark looked straight at me as I ran out the door, and he took a deep swig of the whiskey. 3. The Widowmaker. I shouldn't have come into work today. You see that old pine over there leaning against that other tree? We call that there a Widowmaker. It's called that because if it falls on you, you're dead. I'd know. Saw it happen 4 days ago. Truth be told, I've only been a lumberjack for a few months now, so I'm basically a novice myself, but that didn't stop my dumbass boss from putting me in charge of training the new hire. The new guy was a scrawny kid who looked like he should still be in middle school. His name was James, and when I told him he was too young for this job, he laughed. He seemed to think it was funny when I told him he wouldn't last a week too. I wasn't joking though. Kids like him usually went home after the first day of work and didn't bother coming back. I couldn't imagine him finishing a whole week. The kid was insistent that he was tougher and stronger than he looked though, so we drove out into the forest. The morning went okay. I even started to think I might really have underestimated the kid. I told him so at lunch, but I warned him not to get too cocky about it. We were felling cedars that day, and I pointed to an old rotting one that had started coming down on its own before getting caught in another tree. I told the kid about Widowmakers. just like the guy who trained me had done. The kid laughed and said he wasn't married, so he had nothing to worry about. I persisted in my warnings. This was a dangerous job, and trees like that kill a lot of good people. How bad can it be? He said, grabbing a chainsaw, swinging it around his head like he was Leatherface. Damn kid was making me mad now. I was about to tell him to put his chainsaw down and get his ass off worksite if he was going to act like that, but I didn't have the time. He stumbled toward the tree and cut into it a bit. Not much, but with how rotted and precarious the tree already was, it was enough. Something big and brown flashed before my eyes, and the next thing I knew, the kid was gone. I called out his name, then called for help, but I already knew it was pointless. My heart pounded as I walked over. I didn't even know what to expect. I'd heard a lot of tales of people dying on this job, but I'd never seen it. I assumed the kid would be a puddle of blood. So, I was surprised to see the kid moving on the ground. Thrilled, though. I had been sure the kid would be mulch, but seemed like the lucky son of a bitch might live after all. Then I saw it. The tree had come down on his right shoulder, and I guess one side of the tree was a bit sharp, because when it hit him, it just kept slicing right through him. It obliterated everything in its path, which happened to run in an angle down to his left thigh. What I'd seen moving was the last third or so of him that was left. He crawled toward me, sliding along the ground with terrified eyes, reaching out to me with his last remaining arm. Before I could do anything, he coughed up blood and collapsed, twitching a few times before he finally went still. I took a few days off work after that, obviously. Hell, I considered not coming back at all. There had to be other jobs I could do that didn't involve seeing shit like that, you know? But I don't exactly have many job prospects these days. I made a lot of bad decisions that gave me a criminal record, and got a shit ton of gambling debt on top of that. So I need the money. Besides, I thought it might be good to get back to work. At night, I'd been hearing someone sliding along the ground, coughing and sputtering between raspy breaths. Seemed like it would be good to keep my mind busy so I didn't go nuts, so might as well work. Well, if I was expecting things to get better today, I was wrong. Anytime I'm left alone for 2 seconds, I see the kid. He's pulling his body along with his one remaining arm as I speak, getting closer inch by inch, leaving a trail of his guts behind him. Like I said, I shouldn't have come into work today. 4. I have sleep paralysis, and I think it's morphed into real life. Coming from a family of firm believers in Christianity, I grew up saying my prayers before every meal and before I went to bed every night. It was pretty much ingrained in me from the very moment I could speak that prayer is what warded off spirits and that the name of Jesus eliminated any malevolence. Never once did I falter from this path, nor do I ever plan to. I will continue being a devout Christian to the very day I die, and I pride myself on that fact. Infinite curiosity within my ever-growing mind led me down paths of darkness and decay, however, and the book of Revelation would haunt my nightmares. My wild imagination painted vivid images of cities burning against the backdrop of millions of screams, fires blazing and demolishing everything its destructive tongue licked. It kept me up at night. It made me afraid to leave my room. To put it bluntly, I feared the sky was falling. However, like I said, prayer kept me grounded, gave me direction, and pushed fear out of my mind. This all changed, though, when I began experiencing absolutely taunting nightmares. Blackness swallowing me whole, while laughter bellowed out and echoed, faceless figures staring and lunging for me while I lay paralyzed in my bed. It was almost too much to handle, but I prayed, and it set my mind as right as it could be. The nightmares persisted, though, and I found myself waking up every night at 4:30 sharp, feeling as though I was shackled to the bed. Black shadows would attack me and pull at my arms and legs, while the sickening sound of growls filled my bedroom. All I could do in these instances was cry. Tears would soak my face as I struggled desperately to scream, all while these black shadows danced and howled around the bed. It always ended with the sound of trumpets splitting through the sounds of the screaming shadows as they all dissipated and faded away, leaving me free to move again. Every time, I'd jump out of bed and grab my prayer beads before speaking almost in tongues to God. The nightmares became worse and worse, and at their peak, I was almost broken. I was exhausted and sleep-deprived, and bags drooped beneath my eyelids. Going to sleep had become a fear in and of itself, so I would fight it as much as possible, some nights staying up well into the morning hours. It didn't matter how late I fell asleep, though, because the shadow figures would come at 4:30 every night, no matter what. I had grown annoyed and tired of the whole ordeal, and began to feel hopeless. One night, I decided I was going to attempt to fight back. I crawled into bed that night, prayer beads in hand. I had left my Bible lying beside me in bed, and I drifted off to sleep with my right hand pressed firmly against the cover. Like clockwork, 4:30 rolled around, and there I awoke, submerged in darkness and unable to move. The atmospheric pressure within the space I found myself was that of absolute and undying fury. Screams of rage filled the room from 1,000 different voices, and I could feel my body being pushed and pulled. I could feel stab wounds ripping into my ribcage, and the temperature rose to scorching levels. The screaming then morphed into a chant. "Praise Jesus, Son of Mary! Praise Jesus, Son of Mary! Praise Jesus, Son of Mary!" I was absolutely horrified. I clenched and squirmed, my mind racing. I awaited the sounds of the trumpets, but they never came. I struggled and struggled to scream for what felt like hours, and finally, a scream was let out. "Praise Jesus, Son of Mary!" I screamed as I shot up in my bed. Completely petrified and drenched in sweat, I gripped my prayer beads and looked over at my digital alarm clock, revealing the time to be 4:31 amperes M. Praying frantically to calm my nerves and chugging a water bottle I'd left on my nightstand, I collapsed back onto my pillows, desperate to muster up what little sleep I could. I awoke to sunshine, flooding my room as birds chirped outside my window. Stretching and scanning my surroundings, I found something utterly terrifying. The Bible that I had slept with that night had been ripped to shreds and scattered about the edge of my mattress. Pages of Revelation lay scattered before me on the floor. The worst part of all, however, is when I looked up and found clawed and slashed into my ceiling the simple phrase, "That is not my name." 5. My ex-girlfriend and I saw a UFO. Now, I'm not 100% sure that it was a UFO, as in alien spaceship, but it definitely was something very strange. This was back in 2020, around September. Me and my girlfriend at the time were outside of my house, talking at around 9:10 p.m. I lived in a house complex that had a huge field across from us, that was at least 6 acres. As we were talking, something in the distance, not too far in the field, caught our eyes, at the same time as we looked over to see a giant red light circling in the sky above the field. Whatever was projecting the red light was so pitch black we couldn't tell what we were looking at, so going based off the red light circle, I would assume this thing was at least 3 houses long. I remember my girlfriend saying, "You see that too?" And I responded, "Yeah, what the hell is that?" Then the light started to lower down into the field slowly, like an elevator almost. We stood there shocked, watching it lower down, contemplating if we should run or tell someone. The light then landed in the field and turned off almost immediately, and there was nothing we could see as it was too dark outside. Her mom was waiting in her car, right in front of the field, but when we ran over to her to ask if she'd seen it, she said no, since she was too busy scrolling on her phone. The next day, on my way to school, I remember seeing a lot of military vehicles parked in the alley behind my house complex. I didn't think too much of it though at the time, but to this day I haven't seen anything like that again. 6. A voice called my name. I don't know how to begin this without sounding insane. All I ask is that you read this as if it were real, because that's the only way I can keep myself sane. I live with my partner and a roommate. Our daily routine never changes. We come home from work, have dinner, split off into our own rooms. No parties, no unexpected visitors, nothing unusual. Just a boring, consistent household. The night it started was just as ordinary. We had dinner, I washed the dishes, left the hallway light on, and went to bed. Around 1 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of someone calling. At first, I thought it was the neighbor's TV, or maybe a truck outside. I pulled the blanket over my head and tried to go back to sleep. But then, I heard it again. Andre's, clear, slow, spoken exactly in my mother's voice, the same tone she uses when calling me down for lunch on weekends. My heart pounded as I sat up in bed. My partner was still asleep beside me. Everything in the room was silent. I got up and checked the hallway. The light was still on, just like I'd left it. The kitchen door was closed. "Mom?" I called out instinctively. Silence. I knocked on my roommate's door. She opened, groggy and annoyed. "What's wrong?" she asked. I told her what I heard. She frowned. "I didn't say anything," she muttered, then went back to bed. I checked the kitchen, the front door, the windows, all locked. Finally, I called my mother. She picked up, her voice calm and sleepy. "What is it, son?" she asked. When I told her, she paused before saying, "I'm home, in bed. I didn't call you." The next morning, I laughed it off at work, telling coworkers how I'd heard my mother's voice calling me in the middle of the night. They chuckled politely, told me I must have been half dreaming. I let it go, but it happened again, a few nights later. This time, it wasn't my mother's voice, it was my roommate's. He called my name from the living room, in that same low tone he uses when asking me to take out the trash. I checked his room. He was asleep, headphones still in. "Did you call me?" I asked. He barely opened his eyes. "No, why would I?" From there, things escalated. Sometimes the voice was my mother's, sometimes my roommate's, sometimes my grandfather's who's been dead for years. Each time I asked, they denied it. I started keeping a notebook. Time, whose voice, where it came from. Every entry ended the same. No one called my name, but my name was called. One night, I checked the cheap security cam by the front door. At 1:02 a.m., the footage showed the door opening and closing on its own. The timestamp repeated 3 times, like it was stuck. A shadow slipped down the hallway. Not a person. Not even clear enough to be called a figure. Just a distorted blur of pixels. When I slowed the audio, I swear it whispered my name. I showed my partner and roommate. One turned pale. The other shrugged and muttered about drafts and cheap sensors. Neither of them wanted to sleep in the living room after that. After that, it got worse. The voice called me from empty rooms, from the kitchen oven, even from the shower drain. Sometimes it was just my name. Other times, it said things it shouldn't know. An old nickname a former boss gave me, a private joke from years ago, even the brand of the jacket I'd bought last winter. Personal things only I should know. And then it happened. At 2:47 a.m., I heard my own voice call me. Calm, familiar. Then it said something else. Go outside. I opened the door. The street was empty, wet from recent rain, streetlights glowing faint yellow. I stepped out barefoot into the cold. For a few seconds, the voice stopped. The silence felt almost safe. But when I closed the door again, I noticed a folded note on the mailbox. It was written in my handwriting, but I had no memory of writing it. Don't answer when they call you like me. I burned it in the sink without reading more. Since then, the voices haven't stopped. My mother swears she hasn't called me. My partner told me he dreamed I was talking in the kitchen, even though I never left the bed. My roommate admitted he's heard whispers in the kitchen too, but not in any language he knows. Now, the voice isn't always an imitation of someone I love. Sometimes it's mine. Sometimes it says my name and follows it with pieces of my life, like an inventory. Last night, I heard it again. My name, in my voice, then laughter. My partner swore I spoke from the other room. I didn't. I don't know what's happening. Some people online say it's stress, hallucinations, bad wiring. Others tell me to leave the house and never come back. But I know this much. The voice is learning. It's not just imitating anymore. It's practicing. It's getting closer. So if you ever hear your name in your own home and everyone swears it wasn't them, don't answer. Don't look. Don't let it know you're listening, because once it learns you, it never stops. Thank you for watching Nightmare Proof. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep the nightmares alive. Have a story of your own? Send it in, and you may hear it here next time. Until then, sleep well if you can.